working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus on today's headlines. Myanmar junta sentenced ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi to another 6 years in prison for corruption. The Philippine National Police has assured full cooperation with any investigation that will be conducted by other agencies and law enforcement units on the hostage-taking incident at the PNP Custodial Center that threatened the life of former Senator Leila de Lima. The last surviving bomber in the Bali blast that killed more than 200 people 2 decades ago expresses regret for the deadliest terror attack in Southeast Asia ahead of its 20th anniversary on Wednesday. And global growth is expected to slow further next year, according to the IMF, downgrading its forecast as countries grapple with the fallout from Russia's invasion of Ukraine, spiraling costs of living, and economic downturns. First in our news, the Philippine National Police has assured full cooperation with any investigation that will be conducted by other agencies and law enforcement units on the hostage-taking incident at the PNP Custodial Center that threatened the life of former Senator Leila de Lima. Let's take a look.
The investigation is ongoing, being conducted by the CIDG po, both on the administrative case against the possible na tao po namin na medyo nagkamali po or naging lax po sa pag-implement po ng security. That's why there was some sort of a breach of security. And definitely po, iniisa-isa po namin na pinag-aaralan po. Ano po ba yung mga kailangan po na i-correct po natin para maiwasan na po natin yung mga pangyayaring ganon. First is we really need to implement po strictly po yun pong mga pumapasok po, yung mga dumadalaw sa mga nakakulong po doon na hindi po sila makakapagdala or makakapagpasok po ng anything that would hurt po anybody inside our jail facility po. At the same time, in the distribution po ng mga pagkain po ng ating mga preso, definitely po is we will no longer allow na mag-isa na lamang po yung nagdi-distribute ng pagkain. So it would be more on a body-body system. Likewise po yung maseseparate na rin po siguro yung distribution ng pagkain and yung sunning time po nila, because during that time halos nagkasabay po. And then we would continue rin po na medyo malayo po yung facility ng mga lalaki at saka mga babae po na nakakulong po doon. Any object po that would be used to hurt anybody in the facility would definitely no longer be allowed inside the jails, especially po yung magagamit po ng ating mga preso.
Three detainees, Arnel Cabintoy, Feliciano Sulayaw, and Abdul Jihad Susukan were killed after they attempted to escape from the PNP Custodial Center. A responding police officer shot Cabintoy and Susukan, killing them on the spot. Sulayaw then ended up at the cell of De Lima. Colonel Mark Pespes, the director of the Headquarters Support Service, negotiated for the senator's release. Sulayaw demanded for water. While Sulayaw was distracted, Pespes took advantage of the distraction and then shot and killed Sulayaw. The PNP said they will enforce a buddy system for police officers deployed at the custodial center as part of stricter measures. In other news, the Chinese embassy in Manila on Tuesday night formally denied that China has included the Philippines in its blacklist for tourism. The report of tourist blacklist is misinformation. China hasn't placed the Philippines on its blacklist for tourism, it said. Hours earlier, the embassy issued a separate statement saying tourism is an important component of practical cooperation between China and the Philippines, and that it expects more Chinese tourists to come to this country after the pandemic. The clarification came after Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri cited information from a meeting with Chinese Ambassador Wang Shilian that the Philippines had been blacklisted due to the Philippine offshore gaming operators, or POGOs, operating in the country. The Chinese government established in 2020 a blacklist system for tourist sites in response to emerging gambling overseas destinations attracting Chinese tourists. In several instances, lawmakers had called to ban POGO operations in the country after reported crimes associated with it, among them murder, kidnapping, scamming, and prostitution, mostly involving Chinese nationals. Surigao del Norte Representative Robert Ace Barbers, chairperson of the House of Representatives Committee on Dangerous Drugs, earlier said at least 300,000 Chinese tourists have entered the country since 2016, and most of them ended up as POGO workers. In its previous statement, the Chinese embassy emphasized that Beijing firmly opposes POGO operations. In tonight's other news, Myanmar's junta sentenced ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi to another 6 years in prison for corruption. A source with the knowledge of the case said, taking the Nobel laureate's total jail time to 26 years. Suu Kyi was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment, each for 2 corruption cases in which she had been accused of taking bribes from a businessman, according to the source, adding that the terms would be served concurrently. Detained since the putsch last year, Suu Kyi has already been convicted of corruption and a clutch of other charges by a closed junta court. In the latest case, the Nobel laureate, who has been in military custody since the night of the coup, was accused of taking bribes of $550,000 from businessman Mong Huic. Now, Suu Kyi appeared in good health and would appeal, according to the source. Journalists have been barred from attending the court hearings, and Suu Kyi's lawyers have been banned from speaking to the media. More than 2,300 people have been killed and over 15,000 arrested in the military's crackdown on dissent since seizing power, according to a local monitoring group. President Bongbong Marcos Jr. said the upcoming conduct of an on-site survey in the old Cadlao oil field has attracted strong interest from foreign investors in the country's upstream oil and gas sector. While it is a first step, he said, it signals the government's intent to maximize indigenous resources and has attracted strong interest from foreign investors in the Philippine upstream oil and gas sector, Marcos said in a press statement. He also said the government's commitment to preserve and maintain the investment incentives for service contractors under Presidential Decree 87 has been met with renewed confidence and strong interest by local and foreign investors in the oil and gas sector. This after the Department of Energy allowed Nido Petroleum Philippines to proceed with the on-site survey of drilling locations in their service contract areas by the last quarter of 2022. In February 2022, the operatorship of the oil field was taken over by Nido Petroleum from Forum Energy Philippines Corp. President Marcos said Nido Petroleum committed to funding 100% of the development costs, which will include drilling, extended well tests, and subsequent development of the said oil field. Let's listen in.
And on the upstream part, to maximize the use of indigenous natural gas and oil resources, the Department of Energy underlined to local and foreign investors the Philippine government's firm commitment to preserve and maintain the investment incentives for service contractors that are provided for under Presidential Decree 87 after seeking the guidance of the President and consultations with the Cabinet's legal cluster.
Kanina na press statement mismo ng ating Pangulo na itong Cadlao oil field sa Palawan ay marirevive ang kanilang drilling operation at pinapakita lang nito ang commitment ng Pangulo na maghanap ng mga locally sourced oil products or oil exploration projects para matugunan yung pagtaas ng presyo ng langis.
Now, Cadlao is an old oil field that was last produced in the early 1990s with over 11 million barrels. The operatorship of this oil field was taken over by Nido Petroleum from Forum Energy Philippines Corp. in February 2022 to fund the 100% development costs, which will include drilling, extended well tests, and subsequent development of the said oil field. In July, Mr. Lotilla said that President Marcos instructed him to prioritize addressing uncertainties regarding investment incentives in the upstream sector. Last month, the Department of Trade and Industry said that Australian energy firm Sagasco Limited is also planning more offshore oil development in the country. In tonight's other news, the last surviving bomber in the Bali blast that killed more than 200 people 2 decades ago expresses regret for the deadliest terror attack in Southeast Asia. Ahead of its 20th anniversary today, Ali Imran was sentenced to life in prison for his role in the blasts that ripped through a nightclub and a bar on the Indonesian resort island, killing 202 people, including 88 Australians.
Bahwa saya sebagai pelaku utama pengeboman di Bali, saya sesali pada 20 tahun yang lalu, sampai sekarang saya menyesali, dan sampai mati pun nanti akan saya sesali. Kemudian permohonan maaf pun akan saya sampaikan hingga saya mati nanti. Nah, artinya kembali lagi bahwa kalau yang saya rasakan paling membebani pikiran saya, kalau dianggap itu adalah kesedihan, adalah tanggung jawab atau merasa bersalah karena pernah melakukan aksi teror, terutama pengeboman di Bali.
Dilihat, kalaupun memberi pengampunan seperti, lihat juga korbannya ini gitu ya. Lihat korbannya, apakah korban-korban ini juga bisa diberikan apa? Kalau bisa saya meminta, boleh nggak saya nggak cacat ya? Seperti itu. Nggak mungkin kan secara logika manusia, kecuali ada yang namanya mujizat dari Tuhan. Tapi saya
bahwa rekonsiliasi mungkin saya terjadi sebagai salah satu cara untuk move on bersama. Apakah secara general atau keseluruhan korban atau keluarga korban pasti akan menerima permintaan maaf dari seorang Ali Imran? Pasti jawabannya tidak.
Hundreds of mourners and survivors commemorated on Wednesday the 20th anniversary of the bombings that killed more than 200 people on the Indonesian resort island of Bali. Grieving families, attack survivors, and representatives from several embassies attended a memorial in Bali's popular tourist hub of Kuta, where Al-Qaeda-linked militants detonated bombs at a bar and nightclub on October 12, 2002. Most were foreign holidaymakers from more than 20 countries, but Australia suffered the biggest loss, with 88 dead. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese told a memorial service in Sydney on Wednesday that the horror of the bombings was swiftly countered by incredible acts of self-sacrifice and bravery. To Cambodia now, where Prime Minister Hun Sen has ordered the relevant authorities to beef up security in Phnom Penh to ensure the safety of world leaders who have been invited to attend the 40th and 41st ASEAN summits next month. He said, "I have already ordered the Ministry of National Defense and other relevant ministries. We must ensure security at air, sea, and land entry points and leave no loophole unattended," Mr. Hun Sen said, according to the Khmer Times. The ASEAN summit is historically important because it brings together top leaders of governments and key international bodies from around the world. To Cambodia, he added. Mr. Hun Sen was speaking at the graduation ceremony for Phnom Penh International University students. He noted that due to the importance of organizing the 2022 ASEAN Summit, the government had also decided to suspend the water festival. He also said this would pose challenges to ensuing security. Apart from regional and world leaders, Cambodia has invited the President of the World Bank, the Director General of the International Monetary Fund, the President of the Asian Development Bank, and the Director General of the World Trade Organization. Back here in the country, the Department of Education said it will probe the food poisoning of 88 learners and at least 6 teachers in a school in Occidental Mindoro. At a press briefing, DepEd spokesperson Michael Poa said they will carefully look into the incident in which a vendor reportedly entered the school premises to sell spring rolls and turon to learners and teachers on October 10. That was Monday. Let's listen in.
Kahapon ng umaga, meron daw pong isang pumasok sa school para magtinda ng lumpiang gulay at turon. So may mga learners at teachers na bumili. Siyempre po yung learners na bumili ay shinare naman doon sa mga kaklase. So ang nangyari po, around 88 learners were affected na nagkaroon daw ng food poisoning. Tayo naman po ay tumugon kaagad nung makakuha tayo ng balita covering 88 learners and 6 teachers. Nagpadala po kaagad ang ating division's office ng ating district nurses. Dahil ayon po sa Department Order Number 8, Series of 2007, hindi po dapat tayo pumapayag na may mga outside vendors na pumapasok sa ating mga paaralan para magbenta ng pagkain. Kasi mahirap po magbigay ng informasyon or mahirap magsabi na may pananagutan kaagad yung school. We are still launching the investigation now. At tingnan po muna natin kung ano ba talaga yung nangyari. Kasi syempre ito pong incident report ay based on narration. We want to go deeper and really find out kung ito ba talaga unang-una yung cause. At gusto natin malaman kung talaga bang may vendor nakapasok. All those things.
After being checked up by school division nurses, the affected learners and teachers were then sent to local hospitals. DO8 prohibits the selling by outside vendors inside school premises to ensure the safety and health of learners, only allowing children to buy food inside school canteens, which are subject to the local government's sanitary and health permit requirements. The DepEd, meanwhile, thanked the local government unit for covering the hospital expenses of the affected learners and teachers. And finally, global growth is expected to slow further next year. That is according to the IMF, downgrading its forecast as countries grapple with the fallout from Russia's invasion of Ukraine, spiraling cost of living, and economic downturns. The world economy has been dealt multiple blows, with the war in Ukraine driving up food and energy prices following the coronavirus outbreak, while soaring costs and rising interest rates threaten to reverberate around the globe. Let's listen in.
Global growth forecast for this year is unchanged at 3.2%, while our projection for 2023 is lowered to 2.7%, 0.2 percentage points lower than the July forecast. The 2023 slowdown will be broad-based, with countries accounting for a third of the global economy expected to contract this year or next. The 3 largest economies, the United States, China, and the euro area, will continue to stall. In short, the worst is yet to come, and for many people, 2023 will feel like a recession. In the United States, the tightening of monetary and financial conditions will slow growth to 1% in 2023. In China, we have lowered next year's growth forecast to 4.4% due to a weakening property sector and continued lockdowns. The slowdown is most pronounced in the euro area, where the energy crisis caused by the war will continue to take a heavy toll, reducing growth to 0.5% in 2023. Increasing price pressures remains the most immediate threat to current and future prosperity by squeezing real incomes and undermining macroeconomic stability. Central banks are now laser-focused on restoring price stability. Too many low-income countries are close to or already in debt distress. Progress towards orderly debt restructuring through the Group of 20's common framework is urgently needed to avert a wave of sovereign debt crisis. Time may soon run out.
Described is, about a third of the global economy is going to experience contraction, so that's quite significant. And to put this number in perspective, back in April, when we made our set of forecasts, with only about 5% of the world economy that was expected to have a contraction in 2022 or 2023. So it went from 5 to 30, so that's a very significant difference. And then we're also concerned about the downside risk. There's about 25% probability that world growth would be at 2% or below, and that's already a very low number. So 2% or below, we've only had that 5 times since 1970. So, and all of those 5 times, we sort of know what they are. This is the oil price shock of 73, the disinflation of 1981, the 2008 financial crisis, etc. So these are all big things that have impacted the global economy. And then there's about 10-15% that things could even get worse, with growth below 1%. And 1% is a relevant marker, if you want, because this means global incomes would be stagnant per capita. And so that would be certainly a situation where there would be, the global economy would not be doing well at all. So the battle against inflation has not been won by far. Central banks have started removing monetary accommodation. They are getting closer to the point at which maybe we will enter into tightening territory, but not quite there yet. And so, in a sense, we haven't really yet have a complete picture that inflation is going to be brought under control. If central banks sort of move away from the path they've announced, which is what we mean when we say stay the course, we're not saying that central banks should be, stepping on the brakes even harder than what they're doing. We're saying, look, you've announced the path, we think that path is valid. Why don't you stay on that path? It's important that if they move away from that, then you could see inflation pressures remaining more persistent, more inflation, and the risk you run is at some point, people, households, businesses start looking at this and say, well, this promise of having 2% inflation, it's a joke. We're not going to get that. And at that point, you have a much harder fight ahead of you to bring down inflation.
As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles. Thanks for joining us here on ASEAN in Focus. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.
Mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami.